Hello, MetaPlanet Mad Hatters. My name is Peter Duan. I am one of your co-hosts of MetaPlanet Madness. And my other co-host is also here with me as well. Clem, how are you doing, bud?
I am fantastic. Just ready to talk about all this stuff.
Man, and boy, do we have a lot to talk and share with this community. Just stepping back, this week's price action was really ridiculous, right? And so, I think this is appropriate when, Climb, you pull up the presentation where we call episode 3, Volatility Equals Vitality. Um, so, yeah, once we pull that up, bear with me. Perfect. All right, next slide, please. So, as always, we're going to start off with some housekeeping notes. First and foremost, this is never financial advice. These are just two friends, two fellow Bitcoiners, two fellow investors who are obsessed with MetaPlanet, the stock, and we're just doing everything we can to share what we learned along our journey. With that, number two is as Bitcoiners, we don't trust, we verify. So at the end of the day, we try to be as factual as possible, but at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own investments. Third, this is a live event that will always be hosted on X Spaces, and it will always be on Saturday at noon Pacific or 3 p.m. Eastern, unless otherwise stated. And after this, it will be redistributed on YouTube under the YouTube channel called Bull Standard. Me and my marketing partner are actively working to find a ways to convert me and Climb's conversation and dub it in Japanese so that we can reach our Japanese community as well. Finally, there is value in being live in the present show, and being live in the present show allows you to be featured in the chat and also allows you to ask questions so that if and when we have some time at the end, we will address some of the most commonly asked questions throughout the week. And finally, we know that your time is precious. And so if you do find value in what Climb and I do, we don't ask for anything back other than to like and retweet this if you find value in it. Okay, Climb? So first of all, as you guys probably know in episode 1 and 2, the roles between me and Climb are quite differentiated. It's funny because I'm the guy with the 14 years of traditional finance experience, but I'm also, at least for MetaPlanet Madness, focused more on the marketing and the community side, which I call the qualitative side, aka the one half of the equation that makes a really good Bitcoin treasury company. So one thing as a community builder is I realize, in observing this community and especially other communities, that there are always going to be people during the bull run to be very exuberant and the vibe is immaculate. But then immediately in the bear run, or the bear trap, people start FUDing and having really low energy in the community. I just want to remind everyone that to have what I call a high T or high time preference, right? You see this in every cycle when the price of stock is low, like when Clem and I got in around $2 or $3 per share. Nobody was talking about it, but in the inverse happens when it pops up to $15 a share, and all of a sudden everybody wants to FOMO in. So again, as long as Climb, if you can change to the next slide, as long as you can have a long time preference, and really this is best highlighted in Climb's episode 2, where he showed his price projections. And by the way, there are extremely sandbagged projections. I think you'll be fine. But again, don't FOMO in at the local top and don't FUD at the local bottom. Okay, next slide, please. So as I mentioned to this community, we have a lot to talk about. We're not really going to talk much about the price action, as I think, price action in the short term is quite futile, but really we want to touch on 7 different themes. First theme is disclosures and new shares information. Second theme is a relatively new and interesting way to look at Bitcoin treasury companies through something called MNAV days to cover. This is a metric that was popularized by Adam Back. And three, we want to talk about the near-term future of MetaPlanet. Are they going to issue preferred equity? Are they going to do convertible bonds? We'll cover that. Theme number four is market information. Because MetaPlanet, in the word planet, is trading all over the world, primarily currently in Japan, Germany, and the US, there are some unique factors to consider in regards to market trading hours. Theme number five, short squeeze potential. We're going to only touch on this very lightly, but effectively what we experienced this week was a short squeeze. Theme number six, as always, we are nothing without our community. So we are definitely going to shout out individual community members who during this week has added value to this community, and we want to recognize your efforts. And finally, I am starting a show your colors campaign. Again, this goes back to the importance of community building. In the bull market, it's important to share alpha with the community, but also in the bear market, we need to keep each other up, and so that we can trade above one MNAV, so that MetaPlanet can still go on with their accretive dilution strategy. Next slide, please. So, Climb, take it away with theme number one, which is disclosures and new shares.
Yeah, one of the coolest things, and I'm sure other companies do it, sparsely, here and there. Different companies are transparent in different ways. MetaPlanet shares more than I've been able to find from anyone else. So yeah, they have all their disclosures on their website, like every company will. But the frequency of the disclosures and the transparency that you see here is really cool. So here in December, a lot of people ask about the share issuance. They can't sell shares now because they just finished their what was their 21 million plan, which then April they did a 10-for-1 split. So that's 210 million shares that they finished issuing a few days ago. So if you look back in December of 2024, they went through a lot of red tape to be able to 4x their total share count that they can achieve eventually. So that doesn't mean that they 4x their share count. That means they got permission to. They got a green light to be able to with other steps, right? So down there it's circled, but 1.45 billion is the number after the 10-for-1 split of the number of shares that they can have without having to kind of have one of these extraordinary general meetings of shareholders again. Then late January, they announced the 21 million, which again turned into 210 million share dilution after the 10-for-1 split. You can see the delay here of kind of when they did it, January 28th, until they were able to start selling shares to the market February 17th. So this is just an idea that the next time, it may take a similar amount of time. So they may announce, I'm hoping they announce next week. I don't know what that looks like for them, but I have a good feeling that they'll announce next week. And if so, it might be another 2 or 3 weeks until they can start selling shares. After the fact, and this is also really, really neat, every time they sell a certain percentage, I think it's like 10% of each of these series of stock acquisition rights, which you can kind of read up on later, they have to provide a disclosure. So usually it's kind of, once a week or every few days or whatever. And then they have like an end of month, which is really neat. But here you can actually see May 16th on the 15th series of stock acquisition rights, they sold 2.5 million shares. It shows the price they got for them. And then on the 16th series, they also sold some on the 15th and the 16th. And, that's something we've talked about before, but being able to really see what days there's selling pressure and understanding how that mechanic works, I think really helps with squashing FUD about, like hitting the ATM, even though it's not technically an ATM here. So this is an extension. I think we might have shared this in episode 1, but then I built all the May data into it as well. So MetaPlanet's April and May 2025 share dilution, well-timed, only selling shares into strength. The way the moving strike warrants work, which is their version of the ATM, they're essentially only selling when the stock is positive compared to yesterday's close. So this graph just shows all the days. The blue The blue bars are today's high divided by yesterday's close. So, was it higher or lower than yesterday's close? And the orange is the percent of volume sold as new shares. So you can see, the negative days we had, they didn't sell any shares, and kind of the more positive it is, the more shares get sold, essentially.
So I want to add real quick that I just before today's presentation, I saw a Simon tweet, just like maybe a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about um, how they do it, right? They have a moving strike warrant way of issuing equity. So again, they don't have the same exact ATM structure that the US has. Instead, they outsource it to a third party called Evo. And what's very interesting in this regard is that they effectively were able to negotiate close to 0% fee on selling these shares. This is unique because if you were to see other Japanese companies that were doing the same thing with the moving strike warrants, their fees are quite onerous. So again, Simon pointed out that they're always looking to find partners who are long-term in thinking, and that they're always thinking about the shareholder value without diluting the shareholder value much, but still being a way, doing it in a way where it's accretively dilutionary in the long run.
Perfect. Yeah. I think there's like a few other companies that have a 0% warrant structure, but in Japan, but they're one of the only ones. A lot of other companies do it, for like 8% or something crazy. So it's really beneficial that they don't have to kind of pay too much for that.
Yeah.
The reason I have the pricing in the disclosures and new shares, it's kind of weird that I show the closing price, but the reason that I did, and this is kind of I took the Japanese yen and then I just converted it, so this is kind of ballpark because the exchange rate is slightly different every day. But every single day in May, every trading day from May 1st to the 19th there, they were able to sell new shares to the market. And one of the coolest things is the price was going up essentially every day here. So every day had a high that was higher than the previous day's close, even that day where it closed a little bit lower. And so you can see that third from the right, May 15th, is the only day that didn't go up here. And so the market's moving up despite all of the selling pressure. And a large reason is something that a lot of people ignore, and that's volume. And I talk about it a lot, but really appreciating the amount of volume that they have compared to other companies as a percentage of their total shares outstanding. It's really impressive. It's frequently, I think they probably average around 10%. Something like MicroStrategy averages around 5% of shares a day sold, of their own shares, right? So it's all relative, but 10% is really, really strong, and it's really easy to dilute into without suppressing price. So price is going up this whole time, and that's what each of those days, that's how many, what percentage of shares that traded that day were new shares being sold to the market. And you can see that May 15th, the only day where price closed lower, it had a higher high, or it had a higher close, or sorry, it had a higher high than the previous day's close, but you can see that they only sold a little bit into the market because it didn't stay above yesterday's close the whole day. Here's in dollar terms the amount they were able to raise from that every single day. It's pretty crazy, 2 days that were over $50 million. That's really, really impressive. And really, again, with the price, not only, even if the price stayed flat with all this selling pressure, that would be impressive. For the price to climb with all of this selling pressure really speaks to the amount of inflows and the amount of growth that this stock has. Here's kind of me laughing at myself a little bit. So episode 2, I showed the model with the model that I have, just kind of based on history. I just wanted to have a very conservative model that ties everything together, price, everything else. And monthly dilution of shares was a huge part of that. And the only way to really tame it was to to show these numbers less than 10% because it was way too bullish if I didn't do that. I mean, it was already bullish if I did that, but you can see the May 1st to May 19th, they sold, I think it was like 101 million shares to the market, and the market rose against all that selling pressure, right? And so that ended up being like almost 21% increase in shares outstanding in, less than a month, quite a bit less than a month, with price rising. And so that's showing the May 25th there is just showing that. And then the other is just showing kind of where my model was projecting their monthly dilution would be. So, the possibilities are considerably higher than what my model suggests. So, I'll fine tune them eventually. I need to get more of the historic numbers to really see kind of where it's been. But yeah, the model is very sandbaggy. Here, this is from their, a few of these are from their Q1 earnings slide deck. And I just underlined Bitcoin income generation segment through options premium harvesting. So they are actively taking something like it might be 5 to 10% of the cash that they get from selling new shares. And they are actively earning income through the options market on Bitcoin. I'm not sure if they use like IBIT options or if they have some other form of Bitcoin options over there. But either way, it's a considerable advantage, especially in like a sideways or down market. They end up buying, with that money sort of eventually, but they allow the price to come to them a lot more. And it's just, they do it with just a portion, but it's pretty sophisticated and gives them an edge there, I think. So.
Yeah, I think that is one of the many unique factors of MetaPlanet is that they're generating an income and allowing the price to come to them, as Climb said. And you can really see that. And unfortunately, we didn't include that slide in here, but we have shown it in, I believe, episode 1 or episode 2, where you see their historical Bitcoin purchases and how they almost never buy the local top, but instead always maximize on buying the local bottom. So again, this speaks to the sophistication of understanding the Bitcoin market very well.
Yes, yeah, and this is just showing the same thing, but just kind of part of their revenue, their percentage of revenue. So that options premium compared to their hotel business. And people that don't know, MetaPlanet used to own something like 30 hotels. During COVID, they had a lot of issues, obviously, with that. And that's when they, made the decision, a while after that to switch over to the Bitcoin strategy. And, April, I guess, of last year is when they actually went live with that. But yeah, so they get considerable money from selling options, and a lot more than their one hotel, which they're turning into a Bitcoin hotel. One other thing with transparency that's super cool is that you can go and see live how many Bitcoin they have, independently, right? It's not just, they're saying they have this many Bitcoin. You can actually prove it by looking at the chain. So they have 7,800 Bitcoin right now. That chart is pretty crazy. You really have to change that to a log chart. Otherwise it just looks insane. But yeah, that's pretty cool. And I mean, a lot of people have actually said that that's the reason they're in MetaPlanet, because they are that transparent. And that's certainly one of my top few reasons.
Me too. I mean, this goes back to what we talked about in number 2 in the housekeeping notes is don't trust, verify, right? So again, this is MetaPlanet's way of saying, hey, we know that the first major investors are Bitcoiners. So we hear you, community. We are here to work for you, community. And therefore, we speak and exercise the ethos of what it means to be a true Bitcoiner.
Awesome. So the months to MNAV cover or days to MNAV cover is something that Adam Back tweeted about a couple of weeks ago. And it's a really neat way to conceptualize. Let's say you have something like strategy. It's trading around a 2x MNAV, So that means that it's trading at 2 times its Bitcoin holdings. So, if its Bitcoin holdings were $50 billion, then that means it's trading at $100 billion market cap. Now, that 2x MNAV is 100. So another way to say that is that's 100% premium over their net asset value. And the months or days to cover MNAV is looking at that premium over their net asset value and saying how long until the company can earn that much premium. So how long until strategy can earn 100% yield, through increasing their Bitcoin per share, essentially doubling their Bitcoin per share, to balance out with the premium that you're paying today if you buy the stock. So it's just a way to compare different companies. It breaks at extremes. If you think of a Bitcoin ETF is always trading at 1 MNAV and providing 0 yield. So it would score 0. It would say 0 days or months to cover MNAV, which would make it look really, really good. But of course, it's providing no yield. So you have to be careful kind of at the extremes. There's no one size fits all metric, but it is really useful, especially for companies trading at similar MNAVs or providing similar yields.
Yeah, I do want to shout out microstrategist.com. They have been providing really good commentary. Their website's amazing. And Adam Back, who again was the one that created this metric MNAV days to cover, himself retweeted this thread. So I encourage everyone on this call to first give microstrategist.com a follow, and then also specifically look into this thread to get a better dive on what this metric means. Would you fast forward a couple of slides to actually show the comparison between MSTR, MetaPlanet, and then I think a couple others, Bitcoin treasury companies?
Well, yeah, that's actually what's up right now. Do you not see it?
No, I don't see it. I see days to cover, but it's just like the first part of the thread, unless I'm not seeing it correctly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing the whole thread. The image should be there.
Sorry for any technical difficulties. Do you want to kind of get out and then go back into the presentation?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Let me see.
Sorry for any technical difficulties. And as you guys can imagine, this is only our 3rd episode. So I'm sure we'll be working through this many times. So right now what I'm seeing is the very first part of MicroStrategist's thread. Can you try changing the slide?
Yeah, it's showing the whole thing for me. So let's see. Do you see everything there?
So now what I see is the mempool where you can see the Bitcoins per share. Sorry, the amount of Bitcoins acquired.
Okay.
And then now it's back to the MNAV days to cover. Okay, there we go. Now this shows the formula, right? This shows the formula of how you can calculate MNAV days to cover. Can you change one more slide? So this is what I was talking about, where it was comparing MSTR versus MetaPlanet versus ALTBG, the European one, and then similar. So based upon this metric, the days to cover, MetaPlanet has the shortest number of days to cover, which using this metric is the most bullish. But again, this data was as of 4 days ago, so this is subject to change. Next slide, please.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, could you talk about this?
All right. So this was also in their Q1 earnings presentation. And this is just the months to MNAV cover is something that I struggle to explain a little bit because there's 4 or 5 or 6 different ways to conceptualize it. The easiest way is probably just to say, what is the current premium and how long is it going to take to earn that in Bitcoin per share yield? You can look in the rearview mirror and say, when have they doubled or how long has it taken for their last double of Bitcoin per share, and then, maybe anticipate that the next double is going to take, an extra 50% longer, something like that, right? But their chart here, the top section, the white graph there is the price. The orange, line there is the net asset value per share. So that's essentially kind of like the one MNAV price. And so the one MNAV price, as they provide a Bitcoin per share yield, is always trying to catch up to the real price today. And so then there's this sort of time shift. If you imagine the white and the orange on that graph, if you slide the orange left, halfway, it would kind of overlap the white. And so that time there on the x-axis is the what ends up being the months or the days to cover MNAV, which then is also shown kind of in blue of sort of how it's changing down there at the bottom.
So again, as someone who doesn't study this as deeply as you do, you generally prefer to have as little days to cover as possible, right? Which means that you're acquiring Bitcoin at a much faster rate.
Exactly. So yeah, if something's trading at like a 2 MNAV, it's trading at twice its net asset value. And if they had a magical way to increase their Bitcoin per share by 100% tomorrow, then they would, it would be a 1 day to cover MNAV. So you would realize, today's premium tomorrow, essentially. You would fully bake that in tomorrow. And, typically it's going to be, months or whatever. Generally months is kind of the time frame, but it is pretty neat that MetaPlanet has it down to, let's call it on average about 6 months. So
perfect.
It obviously depends on the current MNAV. So
got it.
Here's something, and I included this just because I think that a lot of people don't understand this, and I'm still, like I said, I'm doing my best to explain it. But let's say there's company X, and that they have 5,000 Bitcoin, and they want 10,000 Bitcoin. If they're going to dilute shares to the market, and if they have one MNAV, like let's say they have exactly one MNAV, then they can't accretively dilute. They can only dilute to essentially increase their market cap, but not increase the value per share. So if they're trading right now, they could double their share count. They could, sell shares to the market. And let's say that MNAV just stayed at 1, they sold them slowly or whatever, but MNAV stayed at 1. And then they went out with that money they raised from the shares. And now they're able to buy another 5,000 Bitcoin. Well, great. So they've doubled their Bitcoin holdings, which sounds really, really great. But they haven't increased anything on a per share basis. It's still, now there's twice as many shares and twice as much Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin per share yield is 0%. So they haven't done anything. They've been spinning their wheels, but they haven't gone anywhere, right? They're just stuck in the mud. Now and this is from a single dilution event, the math is different if you iterate differently. We can kind of get into that later, I guess. But if they have a 2 MNAV and they do the same thing, they only generate, they get 100% more Bitcoin, but only 33% of that is increase in Bitcoin per share because they had to dilute so much. They lost so much efficiency because they diluted at a 2. At a 3, it gets a lot better. It's 50% efficient. So again, if they 100% gain their Bitcoin holdings, they'll 50% increase their Bitcoin per share. At a 5 MNAV, 67%, and it's asymptotic. So the highest it could go is to 100%. But yeah, so that's just a really important thing to grasp, that like how that curve works. And that essentially graphed out here with MNAV on the x-axis and Bitcoin per share yield on the y-axis. And this is if any company with a certain MNAV sold shares to the market in like a single dilution event, however long it took, but they get all the shares first, then they buy the Bitcoin and then they announce it. And just how efficient that is, because you don't want to get rid of your runway. So if a company has 5,000 Bitcoin or whatever, and if their goal is to eventually have like 1% of all Bitcoin, 210,000 Bitcoin, you don't want them to continually grow their stack without providing really, really, really strong yield for that growth. So every time they grow their stack, you should really ask the question, okay, well, how much benefit did I get as a shareholder per share? Because if, some people think the game is just to have as much Bitcoin as you can, and that's a good game to play. We'll see how that monetizes in the future. The better game to play is increasing Bitcoin per share at the same time. So there's no reason you shouldn't go for as much Bitcoin as you can. Just make sure that it's accretive to shareholders. And
I love
so
this. Sorry,
yeah, go
let me
ahead.
add real quick. I love this because part of the reason a lot of current MetaPlanet shareholders have rotated from MSTR is the fact that Saylor has publicly pretty much confirmed that he's trying to hover at 1.5 and 2x and allowing the ecosystem around MSTR to give him the other investors leverage. But I think using this slide and the previous slide, you're actually showing that you should technically allow it to breathe to maximize MNAV so that when you do dilute it, you actually generate more Bitcoin per share, aka what I think Saylor mentions as Bitcoin torque. Is that a right way to understand it?
Yes, definitely. And this isn't to knock strategy too much. Like they're playing a different game.
Correct.
They're treading through the forest, cutting down the trees, and everyone else is falling behind them with a nicer path, right? They can see what strategy is done.
For sure.
It's a very different game, and also they're dominant and want to stay dominant with holding the most Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, it is a stark difference, even just between 2 and 3 MNAV, how efficient everything is. I think the numbers on this chart, side note, are actually like shifted, so that's a little bit misleading. But anyway, just shift that over a little bit to where the lines are, and that's perfect.
Let me
So
ask
I'll
you
fix that
something.
next time.
So, as you say, this is asymptotic, right? In the regards that there is curve. So, I do believe if you take like a derivative of this to figure out where like the curve curves at the fastest rate, right? The accelerational point, that would be interesting, right? So, in other words, there is a quote unquote optimal MNAV to generate Bitcoin per yield, or am I thinking that incorrectly?
There's a sweet spot, yeah. That's perfect. So like, I would say if it were me, I would want if I was a company and I increase my Bitcoin holdings by 10%, I would want my investors to get at least a 5% Bitcoin per share yield. So, at least half of the benefit of all this work I'm doing to increase the Bitcoin holdings should go to investors in the form of yield. So yeah, the sweet spot for me is over 3. 3 is really kind of that critical point for me. And again, the x-axis there needs to be shifted, so that's slightly incorrect. The graph starts at 0, so every major vertical line there is 1.
Got it. Cool.
And then this is actually kind of evidence of that, and also evidence that MetaPlanet cares about this whole concept. They fully understand. They understand it a lot better than I do, because in their earnings slides, they had this. So if you see kind of near the top, it says target accretion window, and so this was when they were closer to 5,000 Bitcoin, and they were saying, how much yield can we achieve, or how much yield are we going to get by the time we reach 10,000 Bitcoin? And so like from that point, if they had a 1 MNAV, they're showing the exact same thing. If they had a 1 MNAV, they could double their Bitcoin holdings, but they wouldn't give investors anything. I mean, no Bitcoin per share increase, right? Which is I mean, that's like the main thing that I'm here for, and the main reason I'm in MetaPlanet. And it's kind of hard to see, but that accretion window is shaded, and so it basically starts at 3 for what they're targeting. That's not to say that they can't dilute under 3. I think they have a couple of times, but almost every time it's been above a 3 MNAV. And so it goes off the chart. 3 and beyond is really their target accretion window, because it's just so much more yield that you get.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I think this is something that we'll talk about more in the future, and think of different ways to kind of show it differently. But if people don't understand this, they're really missing something that is kind of critical to the whole game and the whole way of comparing these companies.
I think this is great when you think about like some people would trying to time like a market entry, right? So that's why I think you and I got in when it was trading around 2 MNAV because we kind of I intuitively felt this, but this is great that you found it through the actual slide deck where they're actively targeting 3 to 5. So in other words, if like this is me again, this is not financial advice, but whenever I would see something below 3, I know that they're going to do whatever possible to try to increase MNAV above that so that they can hit that target accretion window. Is that a right way to think about it?
Exactly. Yeah, and I would love to look at the historic data. Once I get kind of more detailed data, I may try to create a graph that shows like their historic MNAV, dilution, like percentages of what, or I don't know. I'll have to think how best to do it. But anyway, I'll come up with something interesting, I think.
Cool, man.
Yeah, so here's something else. People generally talk about smaller companies with more growth potential as being more risky, and this is something that I don't fully agree with. So I tend to push back on this. And this again isn't to say one company is doing everything perfectly or anything like that. It's just a very interesting ratio to sort of look at the debt ratio. So 3 different companies here: Strategy, Semler, and MetaPlanet. And what's their Bitcoin net asset value? So essentially, sort of what's their 1 MNAV market cap? You can think of it that way. And then what's their debt outstanding? Strategies around 13%. Semler, they did announce a Bitcoin buy. I think I saw earlier today. So I think they're like 21.5% debt to Bitcoin MNAV right now. MetaPlanet has almost no debt. They're at a 1.4% debt to Bitcoin MNAV, or to Bitcoin net asset value. So, almost $1 billion of Bitcoin, and they have $12 million of outstanding debt. So virtually nothing. And I believe that debt's at 0. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure it's at 0%.
Yeah, I think this talks to actually Simon's philosophy. If you can go to the next slide. This is what he said at Strategy World. This is regarding the 2 potential mechanisms in which to raise more funding to buy Bitcoin. So the first quote he says is convertible bonds are, hold on, I need to decrease that. Convertible bonds are the logical next step, although I personally have some qualms about it. One must make sure that the investor that buys your convertible bond is aligned with your future and not just trying to capitalize on your volatility. So again, in the next couple slides, I'll explain the difference between preferred equity and convertible bonds. But this peeks into Simon's mind on the fact that he probably is not going down the convertible bond market route, but rather the preferred equity route. So this is what he said about the preferred instruments. The preferred instruments in which Strategy has launched are incredibly interesting for us in Japan. Japan is yield starved. If you offer them a structure where they can earn 3, 4, 5, 6%, they'll bite your arm off. I love that. And everybody in that room just cracked up when he said that. So let's investigate this further, right? Next slide, please. So what are convertible bonds, right? So convertible bonds is a type of debt that gives the lender the option to convert the bonds into shares, right? Usually at a set price and after a certain period, right? So if we're looking at MSTR, for instance, they would issue convertible bonds, premiums that are probably 50% out of the money, where they have 5-year time frame in order to hit those metrics, okay? So anyways, what is this? It is a convertible bond in the regards that it is a hybrid structure, right? It is a bond in the regards that it pays interest just like any other debt instrument, but it has an equity kicker component, which means that it can be converted into equity once it hits that certain strike price, right? So why does MSTR love this? Well, Saylor used convertible bonds to borrow billions of dollars at dirt cheap rates. Recently, he was able to raise billions of dollars at 0% interest in order to immediately smash buy Bitcoin, right? Investors were happy because if MSTR moons, they can convert and ride the upside. The investors in this case are the convertible bond investors. Sailor's happy because he gets to immediately get that cheap money without giving up any stock, right? So no immediate dilution, and able to buy Bitcoin at the current price as opposed to many years out, right? Matter of fact, again, on the MSTR side, these convertible bonds have performed so well due to the underlying volatility of MSTR that some of these convertible bonds itself outperformed Bitcoin. Okay, next slide, please. So, but this comes to the juxtaposition against MetaPlanet and why they want to potentially avoid convertible bonds. Okay. A big issue is something known as delta hedging, which means downside pressure. Okay. So when these convertible bond funds buy convertible bonds, they often need to do something called delta hedging. What does that mean? This means that they have to buy the underlying stock to neutralize the risk. If the stock rises, they're protected, right, with the bond converts. But if the price falls, they profit from the short. So this creates what's known as a synthetic selling pressure, which can suppress or cap the upside movements in the stock. For a small cap equity like MetaPlanet, this could be potentially a big issue, right? Another reason is the dilution risk. Eventually, these bonds convert into stock, assuming Bitcoin continues to do what it does. This, when it does convert into stock, of course, dilutes existing shareholders. But a upside of that is that in that conversion, it immediately delevers so that you have a much less debt to equity ratio. Okay, and also a third potential reason why MetaPlanet wants to avoid this is reputation and signaling. MetaPlanet likely wants to attract long-term Bitcoin-aligned investors, not hedge funds who simply want to play the debt equity arbitration game. Okay, next slide, please. So this, MetaPlanet is also interesting in the regards that this is an international stock within the Japanese markets. So those who don't study the Japanese markets, I definitely didn't until I got into MetaPlanet. It was interesting to observe that for many decades, there were at near zero or even negative interest rates. This creates chronic deflationary pressures, which means that these Japanese bonds that were yielding less than inflation itself, right? So in other words, massive pools of cash that are sitting in Japanese bank accounts, insurance funds, and pensions are earning next to nothing and sometimes even negative, okay? So this creates a crazy environment where they're desperate for yield, especially amongst conservative Japanese investors and institutions who just want safety, right? But definitely need the income to survive the day-to-day. This is why, going back to Simon's quote, that Japan is yield starved, and that if you offer them a structure where you earn 3, 4, 5, 6%, they'll bite your arms off in the regards that they will massively buy these fixed income vehicles. And if we were to, look, peek around the corner a little bit and see what MSTR is doing, they also have tapped in the preferred equity market. And then they also are issuing a $2.1 billion ATM on top of that. So that means there is less direct ATM pressure on the stock, and rather they've outsourced that ATM pressure to the preferred equity side. I think this is also interesting in the regards of what Ben Workman would say is that these fixed income instruments become self-healing in the regards that if they do the ATM, which means that they're selling the stock, that means the yields spike up. But then if the yields spike up and there's yield hungry investors, they're going to push back the yields back down, which increases the price of the underlying fixed income. This becomes almost like a self-healing mechanism where there's always going to be this interesting balance between yield versus total return that, again, if we were to look at the MSTR side, these fixed income investments have much greater torque or can generate much higher Bitcoin yield per share than the underlying stock itself. Next slide, please. Okay. So we already kind of talked about preferred equity. I guess we can move on from there. Next slide. Oh, I feel like we just doubled that. So next slide, sorry. We must have copied it. Okay, take it away, Clem.
All right, and we're working to kind of with people in the community to make better graphics like this. So these, I think, are just a slight bit off, so don't copy paste these yet. We'll get better ones to you soon, but it's still pretty awesome. So MetaPlanet right now, obviously, most of its trading is in Japan on the TSE, the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Something that I didn't include here is there's another, it's called the PTS, proprietary trading system, I believe. It's just another, I don't know the proper word to use, but another market over there where MetaPlanet can trade and can trade during more hours, so a little bit maybe before the TSE opens, maybe a little bit after it closes, and something like night trading after, a little bit of a gap there or something. So we'll get something that shows all that. You can also see Germany here, and the U.S. markets and sort of how things overlap. So we'll work to kind of produce strong graphics like this that can really show you, because it does get confusing. People trying to think about market makers, arbitraging between prices and stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff to it, and it trades somewhere, almost 24/7. It trades like 26 or something like that. I don't know, like 100 hours a week or something. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it almost trades like Bitcoin itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started with that in 2016, and it's very reminiscent of that, really. Just a quick thing, if anyone kind of needed this, on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, based on yesterday's closing price, which is referred to kind of as the base price, there's limits that the stock has to trade in the next day. So like today, let's see, right now we're probably in the 700 to 999 yen range. So when we go to trade Monday or, Sunday night, if you're in the US, which is Monday for Japan, it will have to trade within that window of, wherever it closed Friday, plus or minus 150 yen. And if it gets up against one of those limits, like during the day while it's trading, if it gets up against one of those limits, it can come off of that limit. It just, there's no trading beyond that. So like if the stock is moving up pretty fast and it's up against the top limit, like we saw this week, it's what you basically have, like what that really means is that you have a ton of people willing to buy at the top price that they're allowed to buy it for today, or they're allowed to try to buy it for today. And you have like no sellers. So there's just a bunch of open mouths, just literally like waiting for any sellers that are willing to sell at the top price for the day. And then, there ends up being almost no volume. It's kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, I do want to mention this because this is exactly what occurred during this week's kind of short squeeze. But I do want to caution people against FOMOing in those circumstances because the financial institutions do have ways to play tricks on you. For example, and again, I'm sure they learned from the lessons of maybe GameStop, where I've already heard various institutions don't allow people to buy, but they're only allowed to sell, or just some of these trickeries in which these short sellers can get out. And so, yeah, again, this is not financial advice, but during moments when you see these limits being hit, just be careful of what you're getting into.
Yeah, and like I actually saw some people, and I haven't verified this, but I saw some people say that they couldn't buy from like one of the exchanges, like at some point when the prices were going crazy, or one of their brokers.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know if they were just doing something, wrong, or if the buy button was taken away anywhere. But there are going to be games that are played when price goes crazy, and there's so many different places on the planet where this thing trades and where price can be. Where the shorts can re-enter. I mean, in US dollar terms, I think a lot of people may not know this, but it went to about $25. After the US closed above 15, I think Germany, early on, like went to the equivalent of around $25. And whether fresh shorts entered at that time, people doubling down, or just taking advantage of the thinly traded market and scaring a lot of other investors. However you want to spin it, it's pretty complex. There's no way to say it perfectly. But it went from like 25 to 10 in the same trading session in Germany. So there's lots of interesting things going on. But if I were short after seeing this week's price action, I would be scared to have too big a short position going forward.
For sure. And I do want to shout out KH, who is very, very active in the Discord. She also has a very illustrious, decade or two plus experience in Wall Street herself. She's always adding value into the community, especially in the Discord. She said that Dylan clarified for us today that in Discord that Japan added another 30 minutes this year. So Japan actually goes to 2:30 a.m. Eastern time. But again, Clem and I are going to update that graphic later, just so in case other people were wondering about the trading hours.
Awesome. And so this graph isn't perfect, but it's still ballpark correct. So it does not include, it doesn't include some of the German exchanges. The German exchanges are sort of weird, and I don't know all the details. I think there's like 8 different exchanges where MetaPlanet and a lot of other stocks trade. And so you get, if you go to like Yahoo Finance and type in like DN3 dot whatever, you'll see a bunch of different things after the dot. Like there's .f and .sg, and they're like, different cities or whatever over there. And like I said, I'm still pretty new to that. But here you can see what happened with volume May 12th to May 23rd. The blue part of the bar graph is the shares traded each day on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and that actually might include Yahoo Finance may include the PTS on that too. But either way, that's most or all of the Japanese volume there. And then the orange is the US MTPLF, and the green, which you can barely see on most of them, is the German exchanges. So there's a lot less liquidity there. But just seeing how everything is relatively trading, and then when Tokyo was limit up, when the Tokyo Stock Exchange, when 3350 ticker was limit up those days, you can see that they had either like essentially no or virtually no volume, much less than normal. And that's not because there was a lack of interest in the stock. That's because, like I said before, there were tons of buyers and almost no sellers. And so, you end up with almost no volume, and then the US dominated and had, the majority of the volume for a couple of days there. And then on the 23rd, Friday, Japan actually hit a all-time volume record. They crushed it. I think it was over 150 million shares traded, and their prior record was 120 million someday last year. Earlier this year, they had like 117 million day, but this is really, really cool. I think that they were top in the Japanese market for shares traded, and I think that they were like 4th for, Dylan had posted this earlier, I think they were 4th for like dollar volume or, yen volume or whatever traded. And being just, single digit billions market cap company going up against things like Toyota. I don't know what their market cap is, but it's certainly much, much more than that. It's pretty neat seeing how much headline time they're able to get and how much attention, even aside from that, it's self-evident of the attention they're getting and the inflows and the action. Years ago, when I trade markets, I'd noticed that if something had a really small market cap and really, really high volume, like the price was going to lean towards going up. I saw it so many different times, even with like, altcoins and stuff in 2016 and 17. When there's just too many people trying to trade the same thing, price is going somewhere and it's probably not down. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind, aside from, making it easier for them to dilute into and stuff like that too. There's just so many benefits to volume and almost no one talks about it.
I think that's a very interesting observation. And I think Jesse from True North also pointed it out in the regards that there is such things as small unit bias, right? So if you're looking at a $2 or $3 per share, A, people think it's cheap, and B, it's not falling that much closer to zero, but the upside is technically unlimited. So I agree with you. When it's small, small cap, low price per share, high volume, disproportionately, it would most likely trend upwards unless it's like a meme coin, right? Where there is no utility, but this is literally the opposite of a meme coin in the regards that you're acquiring the hardest known asset to man. So that's why it has sustainable firepower, in my opinion.
Exactly. And a lot of the new tickers, and I hope they all do well, but like a lot of the new tickers and something people have seen with different things before is you'll get something that, has like almost no volume, and then it has tons of volume for days, maybe even weeks. And then it just dies off. Like people are just trading it because there's trading action and they don't really understand it. They don't really know why they're in it. And, even if they do, they're just kind of like a tourist, and they'll buy now, hope to sell for $2 more per share, and then walk away. That's what I did with CEP, and that's not to knock CEP, but that's what I did before I found MetaPlanet as a long-term hold. I was considering CEP for that, and just something with my intuition, just, it didn't feel right. And I sold, like same day or next day or something like that. I can't remember, but I locked in profit, and then I found a good place to park it. So, a lot of stocks have very temporary spotlight on them, but MetaPlanet has had high volume consistently, and then that's without the US ticker, which came along late last year, and then now it's just adding to it. So it's pretty neat to see how it is just on average, and then these exceptional days are really cool to see. So this graph here is the same as the last one. It's just breaking it down differently in a percentage of total volume, looking at all these different places that MetaPlanet's trading. And so you can see that on like the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd, near the end there, the orange is the US volume. And so we, had more volume in the US than the Japanese market because of them being up against a limit. So it's kind of neat that they're able to kind of pass the baton to us when they're stuck on a limit. It's, a little bit awkward, but it's really intriguing thinking about it. And then we're allowed to kind of take lead with that. In the price, a lot of people don't really understand like the basic market stuff either. And I'm self-taught on all this stuff too, but like if you don't understand like the price that all the tickers show, aside from like Fidelity glitching or like updating the price awkwardly or whatever, but if you're watching a market, the price that it shows is just the last price that any share traded on that market. The last buyer and seller, what price did they agree to? And that's the price. That's all the price is. So, just like when Tokyo is closed for holiday, or this Monday, we're, in the US, we're going to be closed. Tokyo can do whatever they want with the price. The markets are open at different times. So there's no perfect way to arbitrage and sell on one and buy on the other. People can try to, they might do well, but market makers are going to do their best to try to make those prices match as reasonably as they can between the different markets. And certainly the more volume that gets pulled into these separate markets, the more that's an invitation. That's essentially an invitation to the market makers. Hey, come on, get this under control, and try to match price as much as possible. But there's very little overlap with these markets, so it's impossible if you're looking for perfection. But it's going to get better, and it's awkward when Japan hits an up limit, but it is very, very interesting. I'm learning a lot and having to think in ways that I've never had to think because of holding this stock. So it's pretty neat.
Climb, let me ask you, is there an opportunity for us to benefit as US shareholders when Japan hits its up limit? Like, what are the scenarios in which it is bullish for us in the short term and also bearish for us in the short term?
Yeah. So up until all this played out, it wasn't, in hindsight, it's obvious, but it wasn't like super obvious. Now it's staring us all in the face. Now we can look and say, well, the US hit $16, and what's the highest Japan hit, because they were always up against a limit. So I don't know if that was like, $8 or $9 or what, but it's probably somewhere around there. It might have even been in the sevens, but it's probably 8 or 9. So for traders, not that I'm happy with people, just like buying to sell the next day, but you need high volume, you need traders, you need people talking about the stock and all that. Like it's all good, everything's good for it. So pulling traders in or anyone that doesn't want to be up against a limit and not able to buy or sell.
Mhm.
The U.S. market right now, the U.S. OTC ticker has a serious advantage in that you can get in and get out if Japan's at a limit, and you don't have to just kind of wait for things to happen, because the pop dissipated before Japan even was able to catch up. They were trying to catch up, but every day they were limited, only able to increase by 100 and then 150 yen, and the limits were about to open up even more. But then, everything, however it played out, I'm not going to, make up too many stories of what I think happened, because it's really hard to prove these things. But the price popped in the US. It popped even more in Japan to like in Germany to like $25. And then the sell off, maybe scared short-term traders or whatever, re-empowered the shorts, however you want to spin it. So yeah, after this week, I would say the OTC markets in Germany and the OTC in the US here, there's a serious advantage to having that, because, if you had 3350 and you wanted to sell for $15 the other day, you couldn't. There's nothing you could do.
So let me ask you, so the inverse must be true as well, right? Because German does also trade, but at the same time, there is so little volume. So I've also seen some community members who are so obsessed during the run up that they will stay up until 3 a.m. smashing that refresh button. So what I'm trying to say is there really any value even tracking the German market because of how little liquidity and volume it drives?
Yeah, I mean, you could, you can ignore really whatever you don't have skin in the game with. I mean, it's all equivalent shares. It's all shares of the company. It's all part of the shares outstanding. There's no like duplicated shares or anything like that, right? And if I called Fidelity right now and said, "Hey, can you move my MTPLF shares over to the Tokyo Stock Exchange under, ticker 3350?" My understanding is that they would, and I don't know if I can move it the other way too, but like they're equivalent shares. And so, yeah, I mean, the price action will probably result in a lot of people not getting sleep, because, like you said, they'll be watching it different, while they should be asleep, like Germany's trading or whatever. And it's fun for me to watch, certainly, but yeah, there's no real benefit to watching all three markets all the time. You should really just kind of check what you have exposure to. And then a lot of people would say, if it's a long-term hold, don't even, Warren Buffett would say, don't even check it every day. He would kind of laugh at us for staring at our phones. So
For sure. All right. Shall we go through the next slides?
yes. Yeah. Did you want me to, let me see. So I know Simon tweeted this recently, and it's really hard to get like updated short percentage data. But so this might have been like from April or something. I can't remember, but things only update every so often. And in Japan, I'm really not sure what the rules are there. But this shows that this hedge fund club, tweeted this out or shared this, that MetaPlanet was the most shorted stock in Japan. And with 117 million shares. Now, to put that in perspective, what I talked about earlier was that, how many shares MetaPlanet was able to, through the third party, how many shares they were able to sell to the market to raise capital to buy Bitcoin just in May. So from May 1st to May 19th, they were able to sell like 101 million shares. So this here shows that, 25% of the float at one point looks like it was short sellers. Well, that's 117 million shares. So you can kind of compare the two as far as how much it hurts the price. A lot of people get upset with short sellers, but when they sell shares to the market, they have to buy them back at some point, even if it's at a lower price, even if they make money, even if the shorts make money on the deal, it's still every share that they short, they're going to have to buy back at some point, whether it's for a higher or lower price. New shares that are sold on the market are just new shares sold on the market. It's great because of the accretive dilution, but it's pure selling pressure that's never rebought by the seller, right? Whereas with short sellers, they actually are essentially promising that they are going to have to rebuy at some point. So it's just interesting seeing how much price moved up against 101 million shares being sold just in a portion of this month to the market, through the company issuing new shares, right, through the third party, is almost equivalent to 25% short interest. So, I mean, it's hard to get your mind around, but it's really interesting. And so I'm not afraid of these shorts. I would love for people to short MetaPlanet more. And I'm not saying that in some sort of fake, like tempting fate way. Like, it's really good because these squeezes, whether this was a squeeze that we just saw or not, is really difficult to say for sure, whether it was like the start of it or, whether that was it or whatever. I don't know. But the threat for them is way more than the threat towards me. If they short MetaPlanet, like they're the ones that need to watch out, not me. So, if I'm looking to sell tomorrow and if they're able to short the stock and drop it by 25 cents or whatever, that doesn't affect me very much at all, right? Even if I was going to sell tomorrow. But yeah, anyway, I'm talking too long about that. But basically, it's not the threat that people think it is, and it's a huge benefit when it goes against them, because they have to be very careful. They're not going to just sell a bunch of shares one day. They want to be very careful to not move the price too much, because they're betting that the stock is going to organically go lower, right? Because they want to organically be able to buy against volume. They have to buy those shares back, so there has to be liquidity at a lower price for them to make money.
Yeah, I mean, that's why Saylor says volatility is vitality, right? Volatility to the normies, to the tourists, is either a quick way to make a buck or lose a ton of money. But volatility to long-term investors like us is just better, deployment entry points. So I'm happy either way. Can we turn to the next slide? Yeah, Climb. Climb has been very much in the weeds, working in the Discord community, which we'll shout out very shortly. But yeah, Climb, would you kind of want to shout out some of the nice folks in there?
Yeah, MSync and 21 Machiavelli, both made, and like this has kind of started something. I think we might actually turn it into maybe a small group of people that help in ways like this in Discord. Because there's a lot of ideas where people have visuals that they would like created that show something with MetaPlanet, show how something works, aside from just like the graphs I'm creating and stuff, like, things that would be kind of quick references in the future and would be easy to spread around Twitter and stuff too. So yeah, there's a couple things to fix with these, and we'll add so yeah, Japan now trades until 2:30 Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. instead of 2. I think that was a change that they added like November or December last year. And then we'll add the PTS in Japan that trades like during more broad hours. But yeah, we'll continue making things like this, and I'm not taking credit for this. This is just something that these guys were able to do and put together, and we'll try to make even more and share it with the community.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? Is that Klima and I are doing this because we love it, but we also are focused on building the community, because there's just so much, movement and change within the community. We don't want to be the monopoly within the MetaPlanet community of alpha. We want to decentralize it. And we want to put on and identify people who are talented, who are putting their time and effort into creating amazing MetaPlanet content. That's why I see this as more of a flywheel where Climb and I are starting this, but later on down the road, we're going to incorporate guests who maybe will eventually be co-hosts or identify Bitcoin analysts, right? I mean, I was just at Strategy World talking to Tyler Evans, who is the guy kind of launching all of these Bitcoin treasury companies. He himself was the one that persuaded Dylan to go over to MetaPlanet to be the first Bitcoin hire. And he told me personally that they're looking for 10 more Dylans. So a great way, if I hear this all the time for people in the community, they're like, oh, I hate my TradFi job, or I wish I can work in Bitcoin all the time. Well, I'm telling you, this is your way to do it, right? If you are willing to put in that extra time to give generously with your alpha, we are going to find a way to give you that platform. And if you do it consistently enough, the community will easily recognize you. You know, you guys would be surprised to realize that the Bitcoin community is very, very tiny, right? People who are just willing to show up consistently to generate alpha and just generously, you know, and then being courteous, nice people, they will be rewarded with great opportunities. So that's why we're always going to shout out the community. We're always going to try to find, you know, the next Dylans, the next Climbs of the world to really just help improve the alpha around not just this community, but outside of it. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and this is the MetaPlanet Dojo Discord. Congratulations, you guys crossed over 2,000 members, and also thank you to all the live viewers right now. We've crossed over 10,000 live viewers. So again, this is literally just episode 3. We can't do it without you guys. You know, the way I see it, and Klein, let me know if I'm wrong, is that there's a lot of deep analysis that are getting vetted in the Discord, and then only kind of the best or the most like relevant will float on to Twitter. So if you're really, really hardcore and just want to like dig into analysis, I highly recommend you guys jump into the MetaPlanet Dojo Discord. Anything to add there, Klein?
No, I mean, that's exactly right. Yeah, Discord is both for us to kind of, you know, laugh at each other and just hang out. So it's just a lot more casual than, you know, posting on X. But it's also a brainstorming session. People have unique perspectives. You know, it's easier to just, you know, answer simple questions there. But yeah, it's crazy that like 3 weeks ago, almost to the day, it wasn't even a thing, and now it has 2,000 members. The X community, you know, when we really started posting in there late April, it had like 600 members. I think today it's at like 6,000. And, you know, it's not going to stay under 10,000. So anyone that's betting against that's going to be in for a surprise.
Beautiful. Next slide, please. So those who are going to go to Vegas, the MetaPlanet team is doing a meet and greet. It will be held on Thursday at 1:30 to 2:15 p.m. I will also be there. I'd love to meet as many of you as possible. Yeah, just to thank you for your involvement and your continued support. Next slide, please. Also, I want to particularly shout out this gentleman by the name of Joe Bryan. So he's an English fellow that I stumbled upon on X. And what's really unique about him is he created this absolutely beautiful website and 30-minute video talking about what is the problem. So could you go to the next slide real quick? So Saylor himself viewed this and retweeted it. It got over 1.7 million views, a ton of likes and retweet. So what this is, and a lot of people come up to me and try to figure out like, okay, what should I learn about Bitcoin? Why should I care about Bitcoin? And I'm always kind of scratching my head to figure out like, what is the most appropriate, easy to digest resource that doesn't take hours of someone to order a book and read it for hours, because nobody has that attention anymore. So I found this to be the most useful in the regards that this is like a 30-minute video. It doesn't even mention the word Bitcoin in there until like, you know, 20 or 30, like near the end, right? But instead it highlights the problem, because at the end of the day, most people don't take action if there is not a problem that is painful enough. So this is, you know, really high quality made. If you can go to the next slide. It looks like this in the regards as like Pixar quality, right? Next slide, please. And there's a beautiful website that is in multiple languages. So the website, I know it's small, but it's up here. You can see it is www.satversefiat.com. It is a video. All the materials are free in multi different languages. And I asked Joe himself, I was like, Joe, what do you want to do with this? Like, do you want to create more content? Do you want to monetize? He said, no. Okay. This gentleman, I think, is an Oxford or Cambridge graduate, worked as a trader at Goldman Sachs. He's just been a Bitcoiner, and this is his work of love to the community. So this is the type of stuff where we really, really appreciate and want to highlight. So again, if there is any way to want to orange post someone in a very easy digest manner, I highly recommend that you direct them to this website, www.satversefiat.com, to show them what the problem video is. It's also available on YouTube and in many different languages. Next slide. Finally, I know your time is precious. I did say that this was a longer episode, but I'm wrapping it up with a bit of a campaign, right? At the end of the day, we are nothing without our community. And this is a very vibrant, very loving community. And the way I think you can best show your support for this community is to, I call it, show your colors on your profile. And the way I do it is I highlight the MetaPlanet Madness community on my profile. And here are just the 5 easy steps to do it. Next slide. So first, and I have premium. I don't know if this is limited to premium or not, but if you do have premium, go to the left, go onto the communities tabs. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is then go to the MetaPlanet Madness communities. Step number 3, click on the About. Step number 4, click on the star logo. And step number 5, click on Spotlight Community on your profile. This is the best way to highlight your support for the community. And the second best way to highlight your support for the community is simply liking and retweeting our content, because this is really a labor of love from both Climb and I to this beautiful investment and to this beautiful ecosystem and community. I'm going to open this up to some questions, but in the meantime, Climb, is there anything you guys you want to talk about before we look into some of the questions?
No, I know I saw some here, but I can't remember what they were.
No worries. Again, I want to shout out KH. She is also saying that it is the best video on how to orange pill someone. It's animated like a Pixar quality, and it's very friendly for all users. So here's the actual domain, but of course, I don't think you'll ever type that in, but it is in the chat. And then again, go out and follow this Joe guy. He's amazing. He's very kind, very nice. And I'm just very pleased to be a part of this amazing, beautiful community. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up, everyone. This has been over 1 hour and 15 minutes. Again, thank you for your time. My name is Peter Duan. My Twitter handle is BTC Bullrider. My co-host is Climb That Ladder. His Twitter handle is Actually Climb. We are very grateful for your time, and I'll see you in Vegas. But if I don't, I'll see you next week at the same time, Saturday at noon Pacific. Take care, guys, and God bless.